Welcome to the Modern Couples podcast, Love, Purpose, Growth. I am Marcella, relationship coach, founder of Modern Couples, and fitness and biohacking enthusiast. My TEDx talk and Modern Couples Summit has inspired thousands of people to invest into their relationship skills. Over the past years, I worked with entrepreneurs, ambitious leaders, power couples, and high performers to 10x their love. In this podcast, each episode brings you pioneering strategies and raw conversations to support you navigate the complexities of future fit relating. If you're ready to 10x your love life, let's connect. Because when your relationship thrives, your whole life expands. Links to my current offers are in the show notes. Now, listen up, not just with your ears, but with your heart. Let's dive into today's episode. Hello, Stuart. Wonderful to have you here.
Thank you, Marcella.
Hi. So we are recording here today in Ericeira in the podcast lab, and I'm so grateful to have you here. It's an honor. I met you last week during a workshop that you gave here in Ericeira, and it was on the subject of fertility. A new word, right, for all of us to learn on the subject of fertility, but bringing it really back to what it means in our human lives, conscious conception, tantra. And we did a little exercise that I would just like to share in the beginning to give an idea of, what I felt and why I felt, yes, I want to invite you to my podcast and talk. So it was this moment when I sat cross-legged on the floor. Across of me, another participant, our knees were touching, and you invited us to close the eyes and take about 2-3 minutes to lift a hand. For each of us, it was the right hand, and touch the forehead. And it was this moment when I felt that participant's forehead, a hand on my forehead, that was very, I felt a deep feeling inside my body. It was a simple hand, but yet it touched me so much deeper. And it was a stranger person that I hadn't met before, right? We were breathing, we were feeling, and I had this moment where I felt time and space just shift, I'm in a different reality, and I felt touched on a soul level by a complete stranger. It was a 5-minute exercise, and afterwards you explained to us that we were actually in what I would call erogen zone on the forehead, right? There is this shape that is similar to a yoni, and this touch, touched it as a sensual area. It was a beautiful tantric exercise that awakened something in all of us in such a short moment. And I'm so curious to hear more on, in that moment you said there is something called cerebral orgasm, or the orgasm in the brain. Can you explain a little bit more on the different orgasms that we can feel in our body?
Well, it's a beautiful question, and my first response is to try to feel what you've invited us to talk about and use the kind of language that I think we need and we want. And which, let's say, we're engaged in a conversation of the most holy of holies. This part of the body is, in India, you may know, it's very common to see women cosmetize and put a cosmetic dot right here.
True.
And men as well, and swamis, enlightened beings, they streak this with also different colored powders, because this is where we enter the God realm. The heaven realm. This part of the body is considered the heaven realm, and the lower part of the body has fire qualities. And so when the heat goes all the way through the body and illuminates the consciousness, the chemistries of that part of the brain, the pineal gland, different parts of the brain, they go wild. Oxytocin. We've all heard about it, and it's a great thing that because science is so important to gain credibility about anything. Mm-hmm. Science saying we have a love hormone. There was never a love hormone before oxytocin. There was adrenaline, which made you feel excited or fearful. Many other hormonal named chemistries. But when they named oxytocin, it began to show us that there was actually a basis for the feeling of love. And can be felt, it was first felt or registered by saying that when moms nurse their babies, the oxytocin level went up in the baby. And you could talk to the mom. The mom's oxytocin level, which they could track, also went up in tandem. And you could say, Mom, how are you feeling? Oh, I just started feeling intense love for my baby. And so the science would say, we found this molecule that we can measure related to the feeling of love. Now this practice, or I would call it worship, to try to keep refining our language. If I tune into it, we want to try it just for a moment on
Let's
camera,
try it, yes.
just to try to convey to our audience a little bit of what you were describing. Maybe if you can lean towards me so I can reach you. And already it's not ordinary. It's like a beautiful woman is approaching you. We're on a podcast, but in this space that I'm carving out, it's real. And I encounter you. You've invited this event. I have great gratitude for you. You've remembered that practice, and I'm feeling deep respect for you. You told me you want to be a mom. This all touches me. And it's really, really, really what we call real. And so in that space of what's really, really real, I want to anoint you. Like even in the old Bibles, they talk about anointing the forehead with oil. And we had oil then. But let's just, if you lean really towards me a little bit, and like I say, it's like, oh my God, there's a woman approaching me. And let me just slowly, in a silence, complete this. How do you feel?
I feel it's an interesting form of grounding, actually, because it's not on the ground level. Like it connects me more on an energetic level, and it gives me the idea of I felt you for a moment. It gives me safety and I feel more connected, which I think in the connection I get the safety. Yeah.
Right. So, I was revering you, and we had a moment of contact, and in a different universe, that would be called an X-rated video, if everyone knows what that means. But the meaning of the X is very different than what it means now. It would mean that we're entering a realm that takes special, we could say adult or mature understanding of, not of ordinary eros, but of male. I was feeling lucky to be with you. I wasn't just feeling I'm going to do something to you. I was feeling I'm drawn by you to revering you. And so that, if I put it together with what you said, my intention or feeling state was to ground you in who you are in the area that I know a little, that you've told me about, of wanting to be a mom and our knowing of each other. So it was gratitude and reverence. So what you ended up describing was a feeling of being kind of grounded. if I talk to you after you become a mom, I think you'll say, wow, am I ever grounded now? And yeah, this, by the way, the science tells us that if you trace back from this spot into the pineal and hypothalamus is what it's called, that part of the brain, that's where fertility originates. The hormones that govern the genitals of arousal, of fertility, the ovulation cycle. Men have a spermatogenetic cycle. We could talk about that. It's completely unknown in the West, but they do have that. So all these signals to send timings to ovulate every 28 days, all that sort of thing starts here. And so the ancients would say fertility was close to God, meaning it's up at this part of the body, and the source of life, it's a little bit higher, you could say, up further, but in terms of the human body, a lot of it occurs right here. So when I was touching you there, I say it's an X-rated type of contact with you. But
it was intimate, yes?
Extremely intimate. And it was, by where I was touching you, nobody could say it was erotic in the ordinary sense, but with what I'm explaining, I'm touching you at this, we could say, the source of that part of your womanhood that orchestrates or sends signals to ovaries, to all of your organs in that 28-day cycle. And so that opens up this little practice. There's hundreds, if not, I would say thousands when you get into the variations. This opens up a different realm for couples to establish not just the intimacy of the moment, but to nourish this part of their being, which in turn nourishes the whole fertility and more. Fertility is connected to attraction. It's connected to what we call sexuality. But I'm reinfusing, which is the topic of that workshop, reinfusing it all with what's already there. We just have been cutting it off with the pill, different kinds of contraceptives. We wanted to block that fertility to have an artificial kind of sex, if I can say that now.
Yeah.
It's completely artificial. So this makes it back whole. And you could feel, even on a camera, in 2 minutes, something intimate. Imagine a couple who does this for half an hour, and mutually.
Yes.
Mutually. So there's an alchemy. I'm being affected by your gesture of blessing and reverence for me, and I'm letting that in. It's affecting the way that I feel to you. And that's affecting the way you're reaching out to me. So it's a circular escalating, circular synergy of intensifying the chemistry, because feeling is replicated in the body by hormonal release. Feeling was subjective, but at the molecular organic level, you have to have a sign somewhere in the anatomy that something got secreted into the bloodstream. Oxytocin is, we call it, when you would say, oh, I feel love. In some way, science could measure the oxytocin levels in your brain and blood. They'd say, oh, we just saw it go up. And you'd say, oh, that's when I felt the love. So what I'm saying then is, when I'm touching this, I'm really causing you to, and you, me, let's say, to secrete, let's change it a little. Oxytocin is the Western scientific term. In the Sanskrit, where they have lots of terms, madhu is one. Madhu in this context means honey or sweetness. And then it becomes poetic. It's not just the taste of sweetness. It's what a sweet, wonderful human being you are. You're so kind to me. You invited me to this podcast. It just blows me away. I'm 75. You helped my life go better at this stage. So that's me sharing intimacy in our actual knowing of each other and acknowledging that. And so in all of that, you have more feeling. When I can talk science, you get a little feeling. But when I talk about my gratitude, you get a lot more feeling, which means more chemistry of oxytocin, other things. But what the Sanskrit would say is, why don't we just call it honey or sweetness? And it does a little bit, oxytocin's a little clunky compared to honey. And it gets more rich because what they're saying is that when I touch you there, it's causing an orgasm. This first experience, it's like you're not sure what happened, and we never heard of such a thing. But I'm saying we live like that as a mutual reverence practice every day for half an hour, two or three times a day, and then it gets to be like equal to sexual time together. And you can't keep your hands off of each other. And hopefully that's how couples can feel. Mm-hmm. And you say, I just have to worship you. Mm-hmm. And you say, oh, wow, that's so cool. And then you sit down in the middle of the day and you reach across from each other, and then your day is different. Why? Because this will stimulate what we call oxytocin or madhu in the Sanskrit. And it's just the beginning, because that madhu comes into the mouth, what we call kisses sweeter than wine. Very common metaphor, a way of describing beautiful kisses. Well, that sweetness, sweeter than wine, is madhu in the Sanskrit. The madhu is coming in, and we won't do this, we don't know each other that well, but a kiss. From this, which is the source realm, the rain, they would call it rain, if you translate it, the madhu rains down from heaven. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they were trying to affect the clouds and the rain on crops, but this inner realm is the rain of another name was amrita, or nectar.
Yes.
We get the word immortality, meaning fertility, that contains the fertility of the child, but all is the power that child could create a child. And then that power of the child is child's child. It's infinite. And likewise, it's connected to ancestors. You wouldn't be here if your parents didn't have that awakened in them and conceive you. And you're their parents, mm-hmm. which is now your grandparents. There's 4, 16, great, 32, until we get millions. So that's the whole universe of millions of ancestors that's real. It's as real as you and I sitting here. That's our lineage and your lineage, and we're it. They talk about the now. We're the now of all those previous members of our extended, super extended family till we have 100 million ancestors here right now. And we're the transmission of their potential, their genetic, we call it potential, to have children. Mm-hmm. And they're going, wonder what's going to happen, you know? And so that is part of that simple exercise. It's just expanding upon, yeah, you felt grounded. Well, I would be adding now, grounded in reality. This is the source of fertility. If it radiates, it governs your ovulation cycle, on and on. But just to stay right there and make that blessing, you're grounded in the reality of that you came here through parents who came here endless generations, and there's 160 million of our ancestors. Somehow, somewhere, we're part of that stream of life. And if we live like that, this is to zoom out a little bit, I believe that the amount of war in the world would get down to like every 50 years or 100 years or something, because everyone would feel how interrelated we are. In the Sanskrit, the most central term in yoga, in the philosophy, the cosmology, that yoga, 300 million people are doing yoga in the world today. Mm-hmm. It's an $80 billion industry, and only some will know. Vasudeva Kutumbakam is the summation of all the effects that's supposed to happen from yoga or meditation. We call enlightenment or be here now. That's just the tiny little piece of what the yoga is built into. Vasudeva Kutumbakam is, of course, the whole world is one family. And in that state, yeah, listen, you and I have a rapport, but you do it day after day, you know what fertility is, because this is where it starts. And we're blessing each other here. We get very powerful because we're not just connecting off of desire, which is part of it. We're connected off of all our ancestors, mm-hmm. of our fact that we're even born. And now I'm kind of elaborating. We get interpolated into the world family because we're all a species. And when we have species-wide identity, Hamas and Israel, they embrace each other. In fact, that happened, I won't say too much, but it happened with Jimmy Carter and Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin. They ended a war in Israel and Egypt about 40-something years ago by showing baby pictures of each other's kids to each other. They were having a war. It's called the Camp David Accords. You can read about it. It was not going anywhere. The war was just like it is today in a different version. And Jimmy Carter brought the other two presidents from Egypt and Israel, and they weren't doing well at Camp David. They could not solve the war, and he showed baby pictures at the last effort. And the two other presidents started weeping. Started weeping, and they said, "We're killing each other's children and grandchildren, aren't we?" And they frickin' signed these accords and ended that war. That was still, it's been like, what is 76? Is it 40 years or something? It's still ended. In fact, it's a big factor in the current problem that's going on. But what catalyzed it was baby photos. And that was what I was touching. And we were connecting each other up. So this is not just the couple grounded in your femininity, masculinity, couplehood, possibility of family till death do us part. All of that is packed into this. And the essential challenging factor, which we could talk about, is that your fertility is flowing in this eros. You're not thinking about contraceptives or a pill or an IUD. All of that would make this weak. And the more your fertility is loved, instead of trying to block it off, or you don't even think about it when you have sex, you think you're not fertile. You don't think about it. So all that gets returned in this gesture. We start up here.
A short interruption to tell you the exciting news of the launch of our new signature program, Love 10X. Ooh, I cannot wait to share more about it. It's designed for ambitious individuals, high performers, entrepreneurs, leaders, purpose-driven singles who want to rewire their brain to 10x their love. You have mastered your business, your career, you are into personal development. But when it comes to love and relating, it just still feels like a risky investment where you don't know how to protect your energy. However, deep down, you feel it's time to find your life partner. It's time for that crack your heart wide open love. So, if you are ready for a conscious, deeply fulfilling approach to love, if you want to upgrade your relationship life, check the show notes and join Love 10X.
And it generates groundedness, couplehood, and on fertility basis, it goes all the way out to that one example that did actually happen.
Yeah.
Where baby photos ended a version of the same war that's happening right now.
Stuart, I love how in this little moment you already bring the different fields of your, more than 50 years, 75 years of life experience, but 50 years of professional experience in there. We have been talking about political states, but we actually started with a very small breathing and presence exercise. We have touched upon tantric practices. We are talking about nothing less but how to look at our generation now and leaping in time, like jumping into the past and into the future. And we are talking about so many different concepts. I feel I would like to introduce you actually and say a little bit about where you are drawing from, because I think we have caught the attention now from what you are sharing. May I read out that very impressive biography?
Well, I'm shy, but please.
I'm Dr. Stuart Sovatsky. It's so good to have you here. You are President Emeritus of ATP, which is an association for transpersonal psychology, correct? You are an author of several research articles, but also books. One book we have here, Advanced Spiritual Intimacy, Words from the Soul, Co-Enthogenesis, and Your Perfect Lips are mentioned here as your books. You are the earliest dual, non-duality, and DMT lab researcher at Princeton University. And Stuart was the first to bring yoga to incarcerated juveniles, the homeless, mentally ill, and police departments in the mid-70s. All of that, we are talking 70s. You were chosen to co-direct Ram Dass Prison Ashram, and you are co-president of the ATP for 16 years, director of the first ever spiritual emergence service, the Kundalini Clinic. Your admiration therapy was certified by the Russian government, and you convened a 40-country transpersonal conference in India in 2008, endorsed by the Office of the Dalai Lama. You received awards for thwarting 2 gun violence situations using only admiration. We got a feel of admiration as well already. And you have decades of clinical work with non-medication psychosis, suicidality treatments, and divorce reversals. You are a luminary and renowned author with over half a century of widely proven experience and a remarkable track record of transforming lives. Worked with over 5,000 clients and dedicated astonishing 45,000 plus hours to areas primarily focusing on the alchemy of love, relationships, family, conception, and marriage. And this is the biography which I felt was very important to read out once we got a feel of your experienced wisdom there. And what really struck me was the wideness of fields that you explored, and especially in my generation, in my time, right? Like, I am the generation that has words to describe the differences, let's say, between Gen Y and the Boomer generation. And in the business world, we have ideas of how to bridge those gaps. But still, there is a separation, much rather than coming together. And I like to jump in time and see things and how they work together. So in a way, in a disconnected society that we are somewhat living in, tribeless, somewhat on our own, I feel like I have an elder sitting here to our society who has been in the different fields and seen things unfold over time, potentially also seen the pendulum go back and forth. Like, we can look into history books, and as you mentioned, we see war repeating over time, and you know, how can we stretch that or not repeat the same mistakes again? And when I look at relationships, taking it back to love and relationships, because Modern Couples is meant to inspire new love stories. It's meant to inspire a new way of how we can relate. My goal is to bring pioneering thoughts and actions into our relationships. And I look at it systemically. I look at it from, yes, my own relationship, my partner's relationship, us as a family system together. But I feel that we have lost or we are on the verge of losing a little bit of the quality, what it means to actually be in a tribal setting and to feel the art of relating that goes beyond just me and my partner and everything else is, somewhat against us, or like, whom can we still trust in modern times, right? So I'm curious to hear from you on the subject of the way we relate. What do you see is happening right now, or what has happened in the past years that has impacted the way we relate, the paradigms that shape our thinking on relationships, sexuality? And I know you can share a lot. Like, if I give you one there, then you can just go on. But I would like to see, what has happened over time, where are we at, and what are the important things that we need to consider for a future worth living in, being human, building trust, relating with others, coming maybe even back to that tribal energy that we used to have. Like, what is the wisdom that we can get from people that have been around, that have seen things change?
Well, as I said when we first met, I'm dazzled by your intellect. And you're being articulate about, that I'm pretty complicated, and you help me to understand myself, which is a tribute to your ability to listen and then to assemble in your own way and then bring back a question to me. So I say that first because it's true, but it's also noteworthy that I haven't yet answered your question, but I did. I answered it in an intimacy way rather than, oh, well, I can tell you about what happened in 1970 when the pill was invented and blah, blah, blah. I could go into the intellectual, scholarly realm. But what you were just doing touched me in a personal way. You're talking about me as well as what I've done. So I hope the audience can feel that that's how we should always be. You're given a question that you can give an answer to, but there's almost always an intimacy event. And you can choose to talk about the answer later on. You can thank the person for asking the question. And you can think about it before you just say, oh, thanks for asking me that question. You can say, wow, look what it took for you to ask that question. You had to assemble everything I said. You had to think about it. What an intellect you must have. Mm-hmm. I can say all of that if I think about what you just did, rather than just, what's the answer to that question, and run off. Mm-hmm. So that is getting into the intimacy, expand upon the last thing you said, at a tribal level, or community tribal level of, let's say, 50 people or 100 people. The scale could be 20 people, but something is a group of people that relatively identify in a collective way. So they're nourishing each other day after day like this. Yeah, your generation, a lot of generations, that the great gift of having generations is to praise each other, mm-hmm. to notice what they're doing. Yeah, I'm blown away. I'm in a movie studio, in a telescope down to do what we're doing. These didn't exist in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. You know, they had black and white TVs in the 50s. The TV screen was this big, my home TV, you know. So it's mind-boggling what has been created over the decades.
So fast, yes.
But the one thing that should have been emphasized, and it's because you can get, we could now say, distracted by all this improvement. High tech, it's just mind-bogglingly interesting. But the quality of the human being needs to be brought up to that same level of development. And the most ordinary way of that happening, at least on my topic, is first thing you do is think about everything that you're hearing so you can thank the person for what they just said to you or ask you a question before you launch into the question. I said it about 3 or 4 times, so I hope that it conveys to the audience what I'm saying is good for generations upon generations to do. In the 60s, I was taught to rebel against the elder generation. That was a big part of people who may have read about it, obviously, but didn't live through it. But I was in college, 67 to 71. We closed the college down, and psychedelics hit the fan, and people were aware that God consciousness was an hour away, and war could be ended because it's just a bad idea. That people keep redoing the same bad idea. It's like hiccuping, and you just keep getting caught in it. That's what keeps it alive. You take these psychedelics, their book about JFK, President of the United States, called Mary's Mosaic. It's well presented. I don't know why it hasn't caught on. It could be having its own story behind it, but it talks about JFK being given LSD in the White House, among many other things.
That's true?
That's what the book describes in great detail, and it came from Tim Leary and from this woman, and it's very well described. The guy was an alumni of mine as well at Princeton. I think he was reputable. And what he said was that, not in so many words, that JFK had the same awakening that all the hippies did. They said, why are we fighting? We're all one. And he started to end the war in Vietnam then. There are memos that track the dates that fit in with this book. And he like all the hippies, except he was the president of the United States. He could actually sign an order. And he was starting to generate these memos about we have to pull out of Vietnam. And, of course, there were the disbelievers. Mm-hmm. Oh, that'll really ruin everything. They're going to kill us for sure, and we're weak. And he was plugged into the state that the hippies were in, that I think lives on to this day, but I think it's helpful for our audience to hear this story. He was saying, I get it. It's not a big problem. It's a shift of consciousness. And suddenly we're all one. We hear that phrase all the time. But he was the head of it, and we know what happened. Within a month or two, he was assassinated. And we do have very good suspicion that nobody knows for sure whether it was an inside job, that he was thought of as too dangerous to be president because he was talking about peace.
But I mean, you're opening the door as well to what is possible with the help of psychedelics on the subject of relating, right? Like all of a sudden a president is able to see the bigger picture. It's like, okay, come on. Like, can we just prescribe that to everyone? But I mean, tribes are known to work with psychedelics to, consciously bring people together. But like, I would be curious if I may shift the conversation to that, because I know you have also background you bring together the tantric world, relationship world, and psychedelics. Like, what is possible in that realm for couples to experience or for individuals to experience?
Well, my main emphasis is on this, going back to this exercise. This exercise, when I said oxytocin, there are other chemistries that start to look like what happens if you take LSD, or at the very least MDMA, if I can get nitty-gritty, or mushrooms. These are all, I did the first ever, I think you read about it, MDMA experiment, but my mushroom research goes back likewise to like 1969 or 1970. So it's a lot of watching this happen. So when you touch this part of your partner, you're causing what I call entheogenic chemistries to be secreted by the brain without taking ayahuasca or LSD. And particularly if you do it repeatedly over the course of months and years, the brain, like, I don't know if I come across but my resume, I think it comes across that. How did I do it? I also created the first green project in America of scale, $34 million green city lofts, while I was doing suicide and homicide counseling and marriage counseling, creating conferences in India with 40 countries, with the Dalai Lama, which is not easy, and the parliamentarian from Kashmir, and Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, and BKS Iyengar, and Stan Groff. I wrote the eulogy for Tim Leary for his psychedelic prayers book on the Tibetan Book of the Dead. I've done so many things. I could go, how could I have done all of that?
I am impressed that universities also let you research in all these fields,
exactly.
Right? Like, let's say nowadays, my impression is like there's so much regulation and so much, is there money in that? Can we do that? Like, we are not necessarily researching the things that actually would drive us back together as humans.
Exactly. And you really have to, you accumulate over a lifetime what I've just described about myself. And you start to be able to not just put things together, but like you say, in a way that the academic disciplines, you need not just interdisciplinary. Yeah, the Sanskrit people know some of what I just said, but they may not have experienced it. Another key factor that is part of maybe the basis of my resume is when I got into yoga in 1969 and 70, 71, 72, nobody knew what it really was. And in 75, 6, 7, middle 70s, my meditation was on fertility of the body. Not the mind so much, watching the thoughts go by and being the witness, or the breath in, out, and you go, why, I'm being breathed. That's new. That's our focus on breath or mind. I was meditating on fertility. The fact that our cells divide 3.8 million times per second. Nobody taught me that. The basic, when they say the living body, what is it in a scientific sense? The dead body stops doing that. Mm-hmm. Well, what does it feel like? I know what the breath feels like, and everyone who's meditated, you've all been taught, close your eyes, follow your breath. Not once, but I saw what was missing. That was my career, too. It was over and over again. I would see what was missing, and in this case, I started out way back 46, 48 years ago, meditating on the fertility of the body. That's why I can talk about this so much, and what happens. And yes, this has a psychedelic potency to it. And so the tribe, getting back to the tribe, you have a group of people. It could be just a couple. In my case, basically, it was just me. I was unable to really find any either partner or a couple groups that were meditating on fertility in America. In India, big time. That's why I could get the attention of the Dalai Lama with the World Family. That conference is on World Family was on fertility. And he said he gets like 100 requests per month to go do things. Mine stood out.
I hope you are fully enjoying this episode. I get asked often why to invest in your relationship skills. And I want to share with you 12 scientifically proven benefits of being in a modern couples relationship. Now, did you know that modern couples, hence couples who are in love, do the work that is needed to fully thrive stronger together, are measurably happier, live longer, make more money, are physically healthier, have more sex, have improved mental health, recover faster from illness, cope better with life's problems, travel more, have fewer addictions, and inspire others to greatness? Last but not least, modern couples, those that support each other and sculpture each other into the greatest version of themselves, ultimately make a bigger impact in their family system, in their community, in their businesses, in the way they show up in life. Imagine this was the normal way of how couples around you and within you radiate. If you are an ambitious human aiming for the 12 and more benefits, I'm here to support you to rewire your brain for the 10x kind of love. All information are in the show notes. Now, let's continue the episode.
He wanted his, and I feel obligated to use his name because that's what he wants me to do.
Yeah.
To say, look, this guy did something that's should deserve to change the world, not just one or two or 5,000 couples, which I did help. And so this idea of a tribe is more and more people. I'll start with one, this exercise. But like I say, there's thousands of others. If we had 100 podcasts, I wouldn't be till the 80th that I would get to the really hot stuff, because you have to prepare for such a thing.
Yep.
Right? And so then you start to see, there's a lot of religious communities. The Quakers, if you know these names in America, or the Shakers, or the Huguenots in Europe, these different groups, even the Calvinists and the Protestants, they were all rebellious groups within the Catholic Church, and they left and they did their own thing. Well, the tribe that I'm describing is they would be doing practices to create what I call these other puberties, where the body, like the first puberty is basic fertility, but the heart, you feel tremendous love. Why? Because of oxytocin puberty. And you have people treating each other this way. What way? Lots of realizing how much work it takes to make a community, how much to clean the community, to take care of each other's children. Instead of trauma and focusing on what went wrong, you have to remember Freud was a medical doctor. He was like the worst person, in my opinion, worst profession, the way to be trained. Let's give this guy the power to tell people how to live their emotional life and their family life. Mm-hmm. He was a disease guy. Walt Whitman, if you know, American poet, there are probably others, I would always say, because he would talk about the beauty of romantic love. If he had generated, roughly a contemporary, he was a little bit earlier and died way earlier, but but if he had been the father of psychology, we would be having the tribal culture, it'd be 150, 200 years into it, of people, ordinary life. Well, that's what they're talking about. You have a child, you're blown away. You look at your spouse, you're blown away, not for an hour, but for the rest of your life. And what you say day after day is to the husband, you say, thank you for giving me your fertility. And it was not just yours. It doesn't do anything unless it's commingled with mine. So now you've changed the idea of gender completely.
That was what happened with Freud taking on more of our thinking about psychology and about relationships, right?
Yeah.
But beforehand,
yes, it was a tribally shared realities. The anthropology is filled with this, that they have a term, individual instead of individual in anthropology, which means, yeah, there's some difference, but not individual. There's more of a collective sharing. And that's what tribe means. You're sharing more.
Yes.
And so, but what I'm getting at is, what are they sharing? They're sharing the awe of that we're the current manifestation or incarnation of this tribe that has a lineage of thousands of generations back. And you're awake to that every second. Yes. And everybody's talking the way I'm talking to each other. and permutations of it. You're not talking about trauma or if it is much, because there's not, over time there's less of it. Why? If you know what a baby is, there's no room for child abuse. If you know what a child is, that's what's been lost. And yes, the focus of the medical gaze kept looking at the part was lost rather than the power of how do we get much more quickly to the ideal tribal environment. And this practice, as I say, there's hundreds of others, this is a very quick way to prevent future trauma. Because if you awaken this, people see what life is. It's like LSD or something. Like JFK takes it, he says, I'm going to end a war. You know, it's very powerful up here. And this is where the change agent's so strong. And the sexuality changes. The kissing becomes very crucial. Becomes like intercourse is right now. Kissing becomes more profound because you're drinking each other's brain nectars. Mm-hmm. You can't do that for intercourse. And then you start feeling intercourse is, you don't need it like you used to because this is so powerful. It's like taking LSD from your partner's mouth. And you go, we can't get that through intercourse, can we? And you go, no. And like I say, there's thousands of other permutations. But it all starts to fit together, and you get out of the Freudian model of sex, his view of the family, which was very dark, and it's slowly getting replaced with the ideal, which is the family is beautiful. The mother and father are beautiful. They should be, can be, it's not should be. They can't help but thank each other every day for the food, the going to work, the creating of the home, because meaning is back. It's not just earning a living. It's earning a living to take care, they say it, of the family. But everybody is like almost on their knees to each other in gratitude. And this is common practice. It's not just at a ritual, at a ayahuasca ceremony. It's everyday life. What does that mean? In a sense, it means you've made real what happens in a ceremony, a medicine of any sort, ceremony. You're having it happen through the normal chemistry. And how are you making that chemistry? You're looking out of your eyes, because you are heightened, and saying wonderful things to each other. And if there are conflicts, that's a different topic for another podcast, but it's not that hard I've solved so many very difficult homicidal situations, not just divorce and couple situations. Yeah, just admiration. No cops, and very hard, because people can die if you make a mistake. And suicide, many of them, just admiring. People get a life, they start feeling their life is worth living.
I mean, that is one of the key points, I think, in our society, this idea of like, I need to achieve alone what was actually meant to be for the group. And if I have a hard time, then I still have to figure it out alone. And if I cannot, then I get depressed, or even to the verge of like, why am I even living? When actually, you know, we are social beings. We are meant to be together. We are meant to deal with things together. And what you are describing is like, in turn, like, let's say pre-Freudian, but in the tribal sense. And I love reading books on, and it's unfortunately books, it's not my let's say my living surrounding, but reading books on, for me, which is African descent, right? Like I have great-grandmas from Africa, so I'm drawn to look at African tribal culture and this idea of like you always have your ancestors around you. When you plan for a trip, you ask your ancestors for, you know, support on that journey or for permission, and just this awareness that they are there and that for a moment in the here and now you are present with everyone behind you, but also you know that you are weaving the path for everyone that is coming. For me, that's such a powerful and beautiful idea. I'm not in this alone. And, you know, especially, I think nowadays we have many situations where many of us do personal development, potentially read books, potentially learn how to have a conflict conversation. But then when that situation comes up and I say the right words and I do the right things, and then I have someone like in front of me who just doesn't hear it, doesn't understand it, to actually tune inwards and see all your ancestors or spirit guides or whoever celebrate for you, like just showing up with your highest self, even though it's not received or seen, can take away this sense of I'm alone here, right? Like, how can I bring back that tribal power in my day-to-day and reconnect with my ancestors and my future lineage? I find that very powerful when it comes to relating, to really see, okay, what I do right now, what I do with my partner, it has an impact to all future generations. And just for that, I feel very often, hey, let's look more into old books. Let's talk about what happened in the past. What can we learn from? What can we draw from? So I really admire the how you were able to bring from ancient traditions, like find a language for modern days and actually take it into the world of science as well, which I find is a challenge. Yeah. Let's see. I am curious. Maybe you can answer that briefly. The fertility of men, because you touched upon that, and it has been a question that came up quite a few times in my life. So we know the feminine cycle, 28 days more or less. But what is the masculine cycle?
Yeah, thanks for asking. And the fact that you're interested, I don't want to miss that.
Yes.
You wouldn't have asked it if you weren't interested, and I want to acknowledge you. That women have taught men to be interested in women way more in a broader way of what a woman is. When we were growing up in the 50s and 60s, it was just assumed that everybody knew. And then you find out later that they're not just there because they look good, and that's the purpose of each other. So I'm very touched, that you want to know about men. And so the 46, roughly, it's not as definite as the female cycle. It's ongoing. But the way they measure it is if you saw the food, a meal you ate, and you tracked it for 40-some days, you would see the first thing is it turns to starch and sugar in the mouth, and then protein and sugar goes to the liver and stored. You would track it hour after hour. That's been done. But when you start to get into the third or fourth day, most of what science would say is you've defecated most of it out, and the rest of it is in your body. No. In Ayurveda or tantric, you could say, physiology, they're saying, no, it keeps getting digested. And roughly 40 days later, into that, after a month, that one meal, the essence in that meal, the prana, they would call it, the sunlight, ultimately. The moon and sunlight is another way of talking about nutrition from this point of view, because that goes into the roots of all the plants. The sun and the moonlight affects all the plants and foods that we eat and animals. And so what we're eating, whether vegetarian or eating animals, is what they ate. And it's mainly, you could roughly say, food and water, but all of that came from the sun. And then they have a special role for moonlight, which has a gender aspect to it. But moonlight is sunlight reflected. It's not its own light, but it's its own cooling. So I'm getting into a little bit of detail about this interplay of gender, and you were more focusing me on
the masculine cycle.
The masculine cycle. So,
but I will say, like, the moonlight definitely. Yeah. Like the more I started bathing in moonlight, the more my cycle harmonized. So if the moonlight is something affecting men, I would be curious to hear about that. Yeah.
Yes, it's a short amount of time, so there's a lot more. But if you've ever seen certain pictures or paintings of Shiva, if I can introduce that name, there's often a moon above him, a crescent moon or a moonlight. And that represents this pineal secretion that is like and it's for women. That's why I'm saying it's not as strictly, this is for men and this is for women. All of that goes away in real anatomy. Why do I have nipples, as an example? We should talk about that. Did you know the prostate was a male womb?
Yes, I actually did.
Right?
Yes.
So all these things we have to let in. Well, what is this? How does that change everything? Yeah. So when the moonlight is affecting men and women on the full moon, this nectar or amrita or madhu is on a cycle, which is lunar. The lunar, in that, if you stay up all night on full moon night, you will get the full effect of that moonlight, and it will do an interesting thing. It will take the power of fertility, which you could generate new babies with if it trickled all the way, if it sent its signals all the way to the ovaries, which it does, but it also can send a signal. If you're in a mood of reverence, reverence uplifts, you could say, hormones. It's the alchemy of changing the lead to gold, or the hormone that you get to a hormone of gratitude and thank you for this new child, thank you for this hormone of fertility. And it elevates it, and we feel a mood of reverence. Mm-hmm. We bow because there's something greater, very special emotion, to be humbled and exalted at the same time. Mm-hmm. I'm a carrier of the seed of life of my generations. So on the full moon, in the male cycle and female, a little bit of this nectar is secreted into the brain. It's a moon orgasm of the brain, you could say, for both male and female. But the female body generates a different sequence of events to ovulation. For the male and the female, this creates a nectar that goes into the mouth, and it's psychedelic in its effect without taking a psychedelic. It's called amrita when it comes into the mouth, nectar of immortality. We call it, to use ordinary terms, I think wet kissing is where couples taste these kisses sweeter than wine. Remember that phrase? But when you kiss with reverence, you make that chemistry of the lunar secretion of probably oxytocin and fertility hormones of the male cycle, and the female cycle, come into the mouth, and as the kissing would get more intense, there's made that brain nectar even more powerful. So the male cycle has a tendency of going up. Mm-hmm. The male has a tendency of going up. The female body has a tendency of get ground. Of going, we don't create babies out of our genital area, and what do? You push it out. It's a very grounding. You create home. There's a tendency in that direction.
The blood is flowing down, but you are saying for the male cycle, the energy is actually going up.
Tending.
Rather, right?
Yeah, it's like I say, I don't like to make it black and white.
Yeah.
There was a book, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, by John Gray or somebody. I thought it was the worst choice. You don't want to highlight the differences that aren't even that different. They're commingled. They're interactive. They're not on different planets. They're complete. That's the issue, is that we're all here intermingling all the time. And when you ask me about this, it has an effect on me. Mm-hmm. And that you're a woman asking me has an effect on me.
I think it's for relating this idea of yes, first of all, I start getting to know me better, because that helps being authentic or showing myself with others and feeling safe, right? But then from there, obviously, I also get better at understanding the differences and nuances in others without having to make it right or wrong, but just I have the ability to see the differences. So I feel that very often the idea is in a relationship for the man to understand the female body and the female cycle, which I think is great and important, and I think it's very essential for a man to understand the flow and the dynamics of the feminine body, of the female body. And at the same time, let's say I lack books, I lack not just books, but real people that I can interview that know similar dynamics, have similar body awareness of how their male body actually flows. Mm-hmm. Because it is not always, let's say, erect. It's not always aesthetic. It's not all logic. There is also a dynamic. So that's where I thought, oh, wow, let's see, is there a cycle? Is it, let's say, 56 days and what is happening? Because I know it's more subtle and therefore also harder to notice for a man. And for me, very often, men in my age are just starting, let's say, to get more curious about that dynamic, and are just starting to also understand the female body and still occupied with that. So, yeah, if there's any chance to understand the male body better and how it actually functions, because it might not be the natural energy of a man to understand that body awareness.
Yeah, let me say, this containing of energy that's become known as seminal retention. Have you ever heard of this?
Yes.
1950, 60, 70, 80, 90 was unknown. And it took a while I've tried it, to give presentations at conferences. They say seminal retention. That sounds like the most horrible thing I can think of. And it's probably impossible. So now I talk to you on a podcast and already know about it. So I'm just saying a lot has happened just to get to this point. But seminal retention is a very poor name for gestating semen. It's like saying, oh, you're retaining a fetus. No, you're gestating a fetus into life, right? And when the male cycle is going on, there's a gestating of the semen. It's not just retained so he can have sex for an hour or two. It's very interesting. I found that out, that you have sex for an hour or two with a female, they're not used to it. And so that retention was like caught a lot of male attention and women. But what I'm saying is this is cognitive. It's how you understand. No, the semen is not just retained. It's alchemizing. It's gestating. It's turning from semen. This is that other question you asked. The body that creates in a 40-some day cycle, bone marrow, bones, blood, muscles, liver, new liver, replenishes the body. That meal eventually creates light. Excuse me. It creates the basis for the fertility.
Yeah.
The ovulation support system or the spermatogenetic support system. But if you don't, for the man, ejaculate, which is what semen retention is kind of all about, it doesn't just retain, it turns into light. They say bindu to ojas, meaning reta, shukra, or semen, it has one more stage it can mature, like starch and sugar and all this stuff happens. From the one meal, it's all being distributed and alchemized. And then the last stages, it can be semen, but if you are feeling gratitude, any uplifting kind of an emotion in particular, it will assist in that kind of chemistry turn into what we call light. What kind of light? Glowing light, charismatic light, confidence you could do anything in life. You see the problem, you're not afraid of it. You're going to make it better. Yeah. I hear somebody wants to kill people. I say, oh, wow, that's amazing. You have the power of God taking life. Oh, I feel so lucky to meet you now because I can help you make that blossom in a way you hadn't thought of, which is make the world a better place and you will throw your gun away. I've done that with all my friends saying, oh, call the cops, because I know that this is the path into life, no matter how lethal it is. So these high levels of confidence and you know what's right and wrong. It's not just go do any old thing. It could, but mostly it's looking what they call triage, what most needs to be done. Where's the greatest danger of all? And you know a new thing to do. Why? Where's that knowing of new thing to do? Light. Light is metaphoric, but in this case it's very physical. There's more light in consciousness. You're more conscious. Everybody likes to be more conscious. In the female and male cycle, this churning about of what we call the general fertility hormones. And there's a lot more to it. But this part is where it's converted in the male body. More is written about it. That's why there's so many men that write philosophy books, and they're very heady. Yeah. You see it all. Where's the women writing about this? They do it from a different angle. It's a very good contribution. Yes. But you see, that's their tendency. It's getting light up here, which is not a bad thing. But in the interactive gender, it's perfect. You ground me more, I kind of add light, and my light gets grounded, and I want to kiss you, something like that. Because you are changing, you're helping me to share with people who will be alive after I'm gone.
Stuart, the last question, then we come to an end. But from all the things that you have experienced and done, is there a moment where you felt like this was a life-changing moment leading you to your mission? Like, I'm wondering, where does, exactly as you described, all the energy come from to say, I go out in the world, I want to do the right things, I want to make an impact, I want to, help these generations. Was there a moment in your life? Very often it's like a decision, a crisis, or something that happened, a heartbreak, a realization. But it seems like you were very early on very purposeful with where you were heading and what you wanted to do. What is that moment that led you to where you are today?
Well, I just think of a couple gifts. I think I had a gift of leadership of some sort. I'm very shy. It might not seem like it, but in real life I tend to be shy. But somehow I could also be a leader, and so I was the head of my high school, and at a time when black students were first ever coming into what they called white schools. The American law changed, and kids in black schools were coming by bus across town. So when I was president of my high school at that time, I said, I have to be a student leader at this time and somehow help this go well. And I only had, 18-year-old's ability, but it struck me that this is what leadership is supposed to be doing. And in my point in time in history, first time ever, black kids were coming into white schools. And I knew, and sadly, it didn't. All the other leaders or other kids didn't go along with what I would just said. There was a lot of violence. Mm-hmm. So that was when I was a kid, I would even say. But then, partly, I got recognized by Princeton. You mentioned Princeton at the time. Now, it's the #1 university in the United States. It's more than Harvard, for whatever that's worth. It's temporary, but it's. So I felt like I was being recognized, and not for career purposes, like a lot can be. You can become a very wealthy lawyer with that Princeton degree if you keep going, or a medical doctor, which is all the wonderful careers. But what I thought, I have to look at where it's the worst and bring what I've been trained to do at a lowest pay possible, because that's where people can't afford it. So I was working in juvenile delinquency with kids that families were the poorest of the poor. That's how I got yoga into a lockup situation.
But that's
so
the
that's
thing.
Where it happened.
You had all the possibility and to let's say go the corporate ladder and not care about anyone left and right, but something inside yourself, like you already had that integrity, or someone guiding you, or like what was it that really said, this is the right, like, and we need that discernment, right? We are looking for that.
Christ.
That was
Christ. Mm-hmm. Christ meant it. I think he meant it. He said, we're supposed to help the meek.
Yeah.
What did he do, Mm-hmm. So it completely grabbed me. That's what we're supposed to do. Money can come later. I find out it's very enjoyable. But for those decades, it was always the worst, the poorest, the locked up. My brother had Down syndrome, man, I'll never forget that. I owe him. He taught me so much. People without anything. I'm sorry, but if we have a gift, we're supposed to do something good with it. And I hope this conveys to your generation, because it's a lot easier to make money these days because the technology is all new and you can learn it and be caught up in, and it's wonderful. If our tech guy didn't know what he was doing, we wouldn't have this right now. But what I was crystallized by is, what's it all for? Yeah. What is this event for? It's for people to fall in love and never fall out of love again. I would find the ideal over and over again. Somebody wants to kill somebody, jail and justice is not the highest ideal. Christ didn't teach that. Christ taught love one another. He didn't say, get the right lawyers in and get this guy taken care of. No, he said, love one another. And I dwelled on that. Yeah. First time I was a juvenile probation officer, I had a kid who's going to prison. And his father was in my office. I was like 27, 28 years old. I'm thinking about Christ, and Martin Buber, as a footnote, he wrote a book called I and Thou, where you bow to each other. Beautiful book, I and Thou, Martin Buber. So I'm in there I'm 27, 28 years old. And I can't believe the father is with his son going to watch his son get sentenced to jail. How ashamed he must be. But he's there anyway. I've been many of those where the father don't show up. They're too ashamed. So I don't know. The first time I'd ever said it, I said to the young guy, I said, Peter, thank your father for coming with you. Mm-hmm. And then I said, not that all fathers come. The father's being rewarded. He's feeling ashamed now. He's feeling proud. He's feeling proud that he came to be, and I'm not a probation officer saying, what did you do wrong? Your son is here. What kind of parent are you? That's typical bullshit, if I can say a French word. Mm-hmm. I was there saying, thank your father for being here. It takes a lot of courage and love of your son. And I'm learning what I learned from Wittgenstein. These are heavy hitters in philosophy. They talked about language creates meaning. It doesn't just name meaning. If I talk about this, you got to hear what I'm saying, because language is making you think this way. So I'm saying we're not talking about, well, now see what you've done. You ruined your son's life, or something, or you must be angry at your father. No. Those are not in roads I'm going down. I'm saying thank your father for being here, because not all fathers come, And I'm crossing my fingers, and he says, thanks, Dad. They share a lit cigarette. I'll never forget that. I said, thank your dad for lighting your cigarette. Thanks. Then they started crying in front of me. That was inspired the whole rest of my 45-year career, is I knew how to see the beauty of the moment, no pathology. What's the most beautiful thing? This guy's here. His son's going to prison. Everybody else is saying, shit, man, you must have really blown it as a father. What kind of family is this? No. All I could see is he's there, and that is heroic. Yeah. And the son can thank him. And then when the son thanks his father, his father's crying because he's not expecting to be thanked. And then I tell the son, I say, look, you said this. You're 17. You have so much power just now. You made your father cry. They don't know this. Nobody knows this. Apparently, I'm one of very few people that can see this way. So I say, yeah, Peter, what you just did, take a look at your father. Those are real tears. Did you know you caused them? What caused them? You thanked your father. And then I could say to the father, can you thank your son, Peter, that he was willing to thank you for coming? And that he's seeing the impact. Can you thank him for doing that? You say, yes, you helped me, Peter, to not feel ashamed that I was trying to come out of doing the right thing. Yeah. And you really helped me become the man I want to be. And he might turn to me and say, Officer Sovatsky, I was an officer of the court, you've helped me see that I came from courage today, instead of shame, which I was feeling, and anger, and then you're making my son see it, help him see it, and he's saying those things. It's changing my whole chemistry. I'm crying instead of feeling angry. I'm going to tell my son, you made this happen to me. You did what he said, but you did it, and look how you made me feel. And then I would say to the son, you be like this with your kids 10 years from now when you're 27. You see their good and teach them to see your good in you. You'll carry this on. And that's how I sent him off to prison.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's a beauty in taking out the judgment in those situations. And I want to thank you for sharing also, like going into that vulnerable part. We are coming to an end. But I know you give tears a name, and I feel that there is, if I think about what is like a skill for the future that we want to have for our future generations, it might be in those tears actually. What would be your desire for the future, a skill, something to remember as life continues? What do you think is a skill of the future when it comes to healthy relationships, this world, and nothing less but save all our lives because we are on the verge of just, not being human anymore in the future?
Well, I can restate what happened. We want to have a skill, if I can call it that, to be able to dwell upon ideal situations to the point that they make us cry, not sad tears, inspired and exalted at one side, but also humbled.
Yeah.
When you can look at many different, I would say in a family therapy session, what do you appreciate about your mom? I wouldn't say, what are you angry about your mom? That's my colleagues. They're interested in that. I would say, what do you appreciate? And then some little kid would say, Mommy's cookies. Yeah. And I would say, that's the most important thing to your mom? Take a look at it right now. And the mom would be crying.
Appreciation.
And being appreciated about the smallest things. Yeah. It could be cookies. It doesn't matter. And then that's what I teach. If you thank your mom for cookies or that she washed your clothes, you're going to make her feel way more than you'll ever know until you are a mom or a dad. And thank your dad for whatever he does. He put up the gutters. He painted the whole house. Thank him. Say, Dad, thank you for doing that. That's where we live. You were protecting it for us. You're going to look at his eyes. You're going to see a little tear form. And you caused it. How did you cause it? By choosing to thank him for painting the frickin' house and meaning it. Mm-hmm. And the more you mean, you can say, thanks for painting the house, Dad, but you got to think about it a little while. This is for the generations. Mm-hmm. You don't just thank people. You have to think about a couple extra steps, what it meant that they painted the house. You took time off. You like to play golf, but you didn't do that for 6 weeks. You painted, you scraped the house, and that's what you did, and you put it aside. Why? You must love us. Mm-hmm. I teach 10, 12-year-old kids to do this. Some of them get it because it's so powerful. It's more powerful than the kid who wants to shoot other kids, which is what they're doing. searching outlets for power.
Yeah.
So passing on the ability of the consciousness to see the ideal anywhere. Suicidal, mom making cookies, it's like the heart of life, mommy's making cookies. You thank the mother for it, and you feel it, and you do it for, this is another detail, a compliment like that has to last 3 to 4 minutes, because it's like dose. You have to get it above the threshold. Mom says, oh, you're welcome. But if you say, they were the best cookies I ever had, the house filled up with the smell of chocolate for like 5 hours, and we're all waiting around outside. The kids are coming from the neighborhood houses because they all know my mommy's making cookies. And they're going, oh, you're the luckiest kid. My mommy only makes cookies at Christmas time. Do you see what I'm doing? This is the secret of is everywhere that I'm revealing to the generations. You have to think about it, elaborate on it like a poet. You have to turn your life into that of a poet at every level. Little kids, cookies become like a major 10-page poem, and then you see those tears. Yeah.
Love that. Stuart, thank you so much for this conversation that took us into all the different realms of relating. I love pioneering thoughts and actions, but especially having the post-conventional conversations, the meta perspective, and you offered that from many different angles, from personal to professional, an abundance of experience. I want to thank you for your time coming here. You are traveling. You came to Portugal to bring your wisdom closer to us, right? We would have to travel to get to you or get it from the book, but now you are here. I'm very thankful to have that opportunity to feel you in life, sit with you here in this space. Also want to thank that you were able to be driven here and that we got to connect. Yeah, like everything led to here. And actually, today I was looking into a handbook because I was learning yoga in prisons like 10 years ago, and I was wondering if I find your name somewhere in the script there. It was 10 years ago, but I felt there's this connection of like, who is this man? I want to meet him. He did some right choices along his way. Thank you for going that path, for always having been on that path.
Well, I just must say you're doing what I was hoping, what I just talked about. You thought about me for a number of minutes in great detail. And I'm letting it in. It's not as easy to let in as it may seem, even for me. To let in my life and I almost cry about, was I that did all that? And you're helping me to complete my life at this age. And we have to do this for each other all the time. The complimenting is not just food, but it's a training in the moment to learn how do you let it in. And we let in the same compliments. Yeah, I did all those things. Every time I hear at a different age of my life, I realize nobody else got chosen by the famous Ram Dass prison ashram to be their director of therapy. And that was 40 years ago. Yeah. So I hear you say it, and you have helped. It's a funny way of putting it, but the Grateful Dead, have you ever heard of that band? This is what they were talking about. You die gratefully with the life you lived, that you lived it well. And I'm glad I came to Portugal to meet you and have this talk.
Thank
and
you.
You're a hell of a conversationalist.
I take it. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to today's episode. You have built success in every other area of your life. But if love still feels like the missing piece, it's time to change that. Love 10X is for high achievers who are ready to create a relationship that matches their ambition, depth, and vision for life. Love 10X gives you the tools, mindset shifts, and strategies to attract and build a relationship that actually works without losing yourself in the process. If that resonates, check the show notes and join Love 10X today. Your future partner is out there. Let's make sure you're ready for them.